No, there will not be another foot of wall constructed on my administration. Number one. Number two, what I'm going to focus on, the fact is that somebody in this group written a lot about the border.
In a stunning reversal, President Biden greenlit more construction of the southern border wall dividing the U.S. and Mexico, a cornerstone of the Trump administration in response to the surge of migrants entering the country illegally. Per reports, Biden waived 24 federal laws in South Texas to greenlight border wall construction on Wednesday. The waivers will bypass time-consuming reviews and legal challenges to violation of environmental laws.
The move, of course, doesn't sit well for the conservation movement, as Lakin Jordahl, a Southwest conservation advocate, posted on X, quote, Biden's DHS will take immediate action to speed wall construction, casting aside protections for endangered species, clean water, indigenous graves, and more.
Flashback to last year, Fox News reporter Peter Doocy challenged White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre about Biden's position on the border barrier. Let's take a look.
But President Biden, when he was a candidate, said there will not be another foot of wall constructed in my administration. Yeah. So what changed?
We are not finishing the wall.
Here to discuss the battle over the border wall is reporter for The Hill, Rafael Bernal. Welcome back, Rafael.
Thanks for having me.
Help us understand what, if anything, changed here. The cynical read is going to be that Biden kind of weaponized frustration with Donald Trump, hatred of Donald Trump, the feeling that he, in many of his policies and words, was bigoted and that the wall was a symbol of that, and weaponized that to get support and win an election, but that the wall was being potentially unfairly politicized in this context and is just a tool that Hillary Clinton used. She described a border fence, and now Joe Biden is continuing construction on the border wall. Is that too cynical a read of what's going on here?
I'm not sure there's any read that's too cynical, but the reality is there is that historical precedent there. The border wall has been going up since 1996. It's some call it a product of Bill Clinton. You could really say it's more of a product of Bill Clinton's relationship with Newt Gingrich. But there's also a more immediate explanation. There was border money appropriated in 2019 that has not been rescinded, and given that the border money was appropriated for wall construction and for road construction regarding the border wall system, they need to use it. Now, there's also the view that the Biden administration could have dragged its feet longer and could have used these regulations, these environmental and historical preservation regulations, to drag its feet and not, have the political explosion that they have today. Because their foes are saying, well, you basically proved me right. You're saying, the Trump campaign is already saying, this basically makes us right about everything and Biden wrong about everything he's been defending the last 4 years. And then obviously Biden's allies aren't particularly pleased either. So it's a lose-lose for the administration.
Of course, the Biden administration, we just heard the clip of Biden saying not a single foot of wall would be constructed on his watch, which is obviously now being broken. But when you look at the Biden administration's policies just recently, the lawsuit against Texas over using buoys in the Rio Grande to try to obstruct migrants coming across, supposedly the Biden administration coming in and physically cutting the razor wire that was put in place by Texas authorities. What sort of message does this send about how incoherent or somewhat coherent, depending on who you ask, the Biden administration's border policy is?
Well, that's just it. It sends a very mixed message. Obviously, border wall construction, the way it's designed, is not quite as threatening as razor wire or buoys with sharp discs between them. But it obviously sends the message that the Biden administration believes that walls work. And if you go ask people on the border, if you ask former Congressman Beto O'Rourke, if you ask Congressman Henry Cuellar, they're already complaining that, their line is always, this is a 14th century solution to a 21st century problem. And it's true. And it's also unlikely. Other than if he were to finish the border wall, which and then he would not be able to get out of it by saying this isn't Trump's border wall. These are just some necessary, tactical changes in certain sections of the border, which is probably what DHS is going to say for the next few weeks. He wouldn't be able to get away from that. And again, we don't know if the border wall works. Most evidence points to it doesn't. Smugglers cut through the wall easily. So it's really one more thing that many advocates are going to say benefits smugglers, because an individual migrant doesn't have the tools or the wherewithal to cut through the wall, but smugglers will obtain those tools for that purpose. So it's really not it's a very confusing message from the Biden administration, frankly.
Yeah, it makes no sense. I'm sorry. The argument that there was funding allocated that has to be used. Look, if people are cutting through the wall regularly, use the money for repairs. And the fact that he sidestepped all of these environmental processes to get it done faster really seems to indicate some real motive from the administration to wanting to get this done, which brings us to this question of who this is supposed to appeal to. For obvious reasons that we discussed, the Democratic base has been, whether it's because they've been programmed to feel this way or intrinsically feel this way for ethical or humanitarian reasons, dramatically opposed to the wall. The border wall is a symbol of everything that was supposed to be wrong with Trump's America. We've heard politicians inveighing against this for years now. Moreover, you're right. The Democrats have been making this argument that walls don't work. Beto O'Rourke tweeted yesterday a three bullet point list of why he has a problem with this, starting with number 1, walls don't work. Number 2, President Biden promised he wouldn't build them. And number 3, now even harder for voters to distinguish between him and Trump on border immigration, a wasted opportunity to use executive power to actually fix our asylum system instead of impotent political posturing. I want to talk about that 4th point. Why aren't Democrats affirmatively putting forward a policy that would address the root causes of immigration? Because I hear them saying the words root causes a lot. I hear Kamala Harris in particular saying the words root causes, but I'm not hearing any kind of meaningful discussion about lifting sanctions on Venezuela or any of the other kind of foreign policy decisions that are understood to be driving the migration crisis.
Well, I mean, certainly taking away Venezuela's sanctions is probably a no-go. There's a big element of the Democratic Party, a little bit weakened because Senator Menendez is no longer the chair of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, but he would have said no to that. And there's a lot of people who think like him. But that question on who's pushing this, that's interesting. I'm asking what I'm asking DHS is if the Border Patrol, of Customs and Border Protection, were asking their political leadership like, hey, I absolutely need this. If you don't give me this, I can't do my job. That might be an explanation. But I mean, but politically, you're right. It's just very difficult to understand where the Biden administration is trying to get to, how it differentiates from Trump's actions, and how it's going to sell this as that idea that Democrats have a humanitarian vision on immigration. And I mean, the reality on root causes is there are no short-term solutions, but the Biden administration knew that walking in. And they are deviating from that path that they set very, very early on, which was, this is going to take a long time. We're going to collaborate with for democracy in Central America. We're going to collaborate with Colombia, probably not with Venezuela, because Venezuela is a very specific case.
Can you go into that more? You alluded to the fact that there were a number of Congress members who very specifically would never get on board with the plan to lift sanctions, even as some of those Congress members are the same ones that are inveighing against the volume of migrants specifically from Venezuela.
Right. That is odd, and it is a difficult position to justify. But the truth is that, I mean, the Venezuelan regime is basically everything they accuse it of. It's not that sort of cartoonish idea that they don't like it because it's leftist, or they don't like it, for whatever political reason. The Venezuelan regime is repressive, has destroyed the country's economy, has basically kicked out 8 million people out of their own country. 8 million people didn't leave because they had a bad feeling about socialism. They left because conditions really are dire. Same thing for Haiti, different circumstances, but people are leaving Haiti.
But do our sanctions not contribute to those conditions? I mean, this is the question. If you feel the desire, if you feel it's our kind of political or moral obligation, and I don't agree with this, but let's just for the sake of argument, if you feel it's our political or moral obligation to punish a regime that we in America just happen not to like. Putting aside all of the bloviating we do about democracy and people being allowed to run their countries how they want. If you believe America has the right to sanction and limit the primary domestic output of a country like Venezuela, its oil output, because we don't like its leadership, then don't you consequently have a responsibility to deal with the migrants that leave because of your foreign policy decisions? And how are these legislators able to take both the position that we should be encouraging the crisis, exacerbating the crisis via sanctions, and turning away people who are leaving because of our own behavior?
Well, there are some legislators, especially Democrats, who won't, who won't appease the Venezuelan regime, and at the same time are saying we need to bolster our asylum process. That, I mean, in that sense, that would work within your argument. But yeah, it is a difficult case to be made, and the question over sanctions, it's at least 60 years old since Cuba has been under U.S. sanctions. The question is, are the sanctions there to try to topple the regime? Are the sanctions there because we don't like them? It is a difficult argument to make, but it's a very big ship to steer. And although there are voices and Democratic voices in Congress that would argue that the sanctions have not worked and that is not the path that must be taken, there are also some that say, well, if you remove sanctions, they're going to sell that oil and they're going to buy more weapons to repress their people more. Which, in the case of the Cuban government, I don't know if the evidence is there currently. At some point in the past, it has been. In the case of the Venezuelan regime, I think that argument is stronger because of the repressive measures they have taken.
Well, we appreciate you spending the time with us here today. Thank you so much.
Great to be here.